Welcome along. I'd like to formally, welcome you to our Singapore presentation of the budget seminar. So it's a week late this year because of the fact that we've covered both elements of the floor. We're covering the Liberal government and the government in waiting, the Labor Party, which is absolutely dead keen to get in there and raid the coffers and see what they can do. 14 years we've been doing this budget presentation, so I think I have a fairly good insight and knowledge of what goes on, and hopefully tonight you'll get a good insight of the events of the recent budget, and we can have a look and review what the potential of a change of government may look like. We'll get straight into it, and I'll start with obviously the legal disclaimer. Whatever I say tonight is just my opinion. If you don't like it, I can't help that. I'm not political. I'm not a paid-up member of the Liberal or Labor Party. I'm not even allowed to vote, as us Australians are that live overseas. So, I'm completely bipartisan, and hopefully I'll give you an independent assessment of what's going on from both sides. Getting straight in, I always like to start with what's the agenda of this, and there's a little bit of an elephant in the room at the moment, and that's because they just recently got rid of the last Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, and the heir apparent, Julie Bishop. She was meant to be there, so the elephant handler and the elephant have both gone. Julie Bishop has now resigned from Parliament in the next election, and Malcolm already resigned from Parliament, causing all sorts of uproar, lost his seat and all things. It's a complete shambles in the political party of the Liberals at the moment. No one knows what's going on. There's a leader who wasn't really wanting to be the leader. The person who threw out Malcolm Turnbull, Peter Dutton, he didn't win the election. Then he complained. 2 days later, they had another vote. He still didn't win it. Julia didn't win it. And Scott Morrison, the former Treasurer, who this time last year I was presenting about his budget, is now the Prime Minister. So it's very confusing. Confusing for them, confusing for us, but what they want to do is, the primary agenda is, let's not talk about that. That elephant cannot be mentioned in this budget. It's a solid budget. It's about all the great things. And what they're trying to say is, don't worry about what we've done politically. Look at what we've done financially. We've done such a good job economically that should override every other issue and put us back in Parliament. And that's really the message that they've got. The truth is, it's the only message. If you can't win on that basis alone, there is nothing else to stand for. They're trying to say we're also credible and fair, and we'll see about that in a little while. And they're trying to show that they're compassionate. They need to be for everybody. And they keep talking about fair go, fair go. I see the Labor Party campaign, there was one of the unions actually, that I saw a campaign saying, fair go, time to go. That's their slogan off that. But they're trying to say, hey, we're the right people for everybody, vote for us. And one of the things they're trying to do is say that they are listening and learning. A few budgets now they've had issues where they've ignored, particularly the environment, or policies that weren't very popular. They've tried to say, hey, we're listening now, we're caring now, we're taking everything into account. And at this 12th hour, they have finally done something about the environment. We'll talk about that later. I'm not sure if it's enough. I'm not sure if it's too little, too late. We'll soon see. But they are starting to listen. Now, every year I have a favourite quote, and this year it's from the new Treasurer, Joss Frydenberg, and it's, they believe in the power of aspiration and enterprise. Now, I've picked that one out of a few other things they believed in and a few other quotes of worth, because this is probably the point of difference between the Liberal and the Labor Party. The Liberals are saying, let's grow, let's share the positivity, let's collect more number, but less percentage to be able to afford this wonderfulness that we all want to enjoy. The Labor Party are saying, keep taxing more so we can pay for more stuff. There'll be no consequence because those people can afford it, give it to the ones that can't. And that's a real big difference. That's probably the defining thing that's going to come down at this election. People who allegedly high net worth individuals, which by Labor Party standards are anyone earning over $80,000 a year, or in fact $45,000 a year, are they willing to keep covering the burden of giving stuff to everybody else? I'm not sure, but it's going to be a big social experiment in Australia. If we look at the financial element, These guys have done a phenomenal job. 3 years in a row now, they have beat their forecast. Last year, it was forecast to be a $14.5 billion deficit. It came in at a $4.2 billion deficit, $10 billion better off. The year before, 29 forecast, 10 billion, 19 better off. The year before, 35 forecast, 33 actual, 2 billion better off. So that's 3 years in a row they've beat the budget. Again, I'm baffled when I look at the news, when I watch the interviews from them. They don't talk about that. They don't say we're proud to have done better than we expected. You know why that is in Australia? Because if they harp on the fact that they did $10 billion better than expected, they get flogged for not spending that $10 billion on some minority interest group. Everybody jumps up and says, well, if you had 10 billion spare, why didn't you give it to me? So there is no pat on the back for outperformance. There is scathing for not spending what you said you would. And this is the problem in Australia. Now you can see, last year I said I thought they would meet their forecast revenue growth. They did. They actually surpassed it. 474 forecast, 485 actual, 8.5% growth. Their payments they kept in check, 484.6 forecast, 482.7 actual. Once more, discipline and restraint. So these guys have now proven themselves absolutely worthy of financial trust in my mind. There is no doubt. Next year, they're saying the budget is back in black and that the surplus has arrived. It is expected to be $7.1 billion. And already there's conversation in the newsroom saying the surplus hasn't arrived yet. You're claiming back in black, but you're still in the red. You shouldn't be saying that. But I think when you've delivered 3 better than expected budgets and you've got things pretty much on a solid footing financially, politically a mess, but financially you're strong, I think you have the foundation to make that claim, and that it should be believable and respectable. You can see revenue growth next year, they're actually expecting to soften in its growth rate to 4.2 rather than 8.5, down to an increase of $505 billion. It'll be the first time that Australian government revenue passes $500 billion. Expenses will increase by $10 billion to $493. So again, restraint on expense growth, reasonable expectation of income growth. Now, importantly here, the income growth is from no new taxes. It's from economic growth. More people employed, a larger economy, and therefore more revenue. And again, this is the difference. Liberals say, grow the economy, we get more money. Labor say, just take more, what the heck? The problem is, when you take more, there is consequence. Just like when you take less, there is consequence. And we've proven this over now 20 years. This is not a new phenomenon. Over 20 years, every time the Australian governments took less, they collected more. Every time they took more, they collected less. But Labor believes that if they take more, they'll collect the same. That's not going to happen. So you can see, looking forward, if they get elected, I think we will be seeing a surplus budget next year. We've got record revenue going into record expenditure, providing a pretty good economy with a very good foundation of fiscal management. If we could keep the same Prime Minister, how wonderful would that be? The surplus is meant to grow from $7 billion in 1920 up to $11 billion, $18 billion, and then taper off to 9 when the massive tax cuts start flowing through. This government says we need to keep passing personal tax cuts back because it's their money. Once we're making too much, give it back to them, because you know why? They'll spend it in the economy. If you hand it back, there's a multiplier effect. There's a little country, I don't know if you've heard of it, called Singapore that figured that out. Charge hardly anything and the whole amount of cash just keeps rotating and rotating and expanding. on the basis of no supporting resources, no supporting livestock, farming, anything. Rotation has value. So Australia is figuring that out slowly. They intend with that surplus to allocate it pretty much to debt reduction. This year alone, there was $18 billion of interest cost in the budget. 18 billion. When you consider in 2007 we had no debt, zero interest cost as a nation. We've chalked up near on $500 billion of debt and $18 billion a year of interest cost. We wouldn't have deficits if we didn't have that interest cost. We shouldn't have had the debt, but by golly, it just exploded because of a desire to spend and keep taxes high. And this is, again, the risk that we start moving towards. Revenue, if things go according to the Liberals, is expected to rise to $566 billion by 22-23. So that's a significant uplift. That's another 10+% additional revenue, even with, as you'll see, significant personal tax cuts, significant corporate tax cuts. Revenue still rises. Again, very simple philosophy. The less you charge, the more you collect. Let the economy expand on its own right. It doesn't need that much government intervention. So let's see what happens. So those numbers are very credible. I have no reason to believe that next year's figures would not be achievable if they, in fact, get the opportunity to bring them in. But that's going to be the literally multi-billion-dollar question. If we have a look at the budget, what they announced, well, the flagship is, hey, we're doing well financially and we want to share it with you. Last year they announced some of the biggest personal tax cuts in the history of Australia, and they've backed it up with the biggest election offering on the planet. $5.7 billion of personal tax cuts. They want to move everybody out of that middle bracket. They want 70% in the middle bracket. They want to take it down from the current 32.5% down to 30%, and they want to lift it up, you know, with low income rebates and literally take that 30% all the way to $200,000, as you'll see. So virtually, you know, 94% of Australians will be paying 30% tax or less. Some of this was already legislated, but the 30% is a new offering in this budget, down from the 32.5%. And it's a significant sum over a long period. For businesses, they've increased the write-off, which they've had each year on a rolling basis. It's gone from 20 to 25 and now to 30,000, and it will now be extended to businesses with $50 million turnovers. And the small business to medium size will also get a corporate tax rate moving towards 25% by 21-22. What they weren't able to legislate was for that to be across the board in all corporations. They were trying to get that for big corporate as well as small corporate, but that's been blocked by the crossbenchers and the Labor Party. Again, if you've heard me before, you know I'm not in favour of corporate tax cuts. I don't see that they have any real benefit, but there's an ideological element there. I don't think it'll make much difference. It comes back into Australia's system quite well through the imputation credits, although the Labor Party are trying to chase those too, so we'll see how that goes. But it's a big cut. And what they have been doing is very successfully going after, finding, policing, and getting abusers at the very large scale to cough up with large sums. They've brought in $3.6 billion so far, and they intend to raise near on 10 over the next decade in abuse through high net worths and multinationals. So they've really, really done a great job in tracking and monitoring there. The tax rates, here they are. Well, you can see at the moment, effective from 1st of July 18 now, we've got an 18,000 tax-free threshold. 18 to 37 is currently 19%. Then it moves to a 32.5% bracket between 37 and 90. 90 to 180 is 37, and over 180,000, 45%. Now, they've already passed and legislated from July 2022 that middle bracket, the first bracket of 19% will lift from a 37 top end to a 41,000. So that's been legislated, passed, and that was not easy. You know, I think it would have been easier to pass a kidney stone. But they've got that through. What they've proposed now is to lift that 41,000 top threshold up to 45,000 instead of 41. So offering, again, some tax relief for that lower income. Now, Labor is still in two minds. They probably will support this, but they're not keen to support the next bracket, which is to move that 37 out. They're saying that everyone that's in the 37 bracket doesn't deserve a tax deduction. So anyone above $90,000 a year, they don't deserve it. And their logic is that why should someone that's earning $45,000 pay the same tax rate as someone earning $180,000? That's not fair. Why should that person pay 30 cents in the dollar, 32.5 cents, the same as me? It's not fair. They earn more than me. Well, the fact of the matter is, if it's a percentage tax, they're paying a heck lot more tax. Why is it fair they pay more, is the question. So the Liberals have said, no, look, let's just take that whole middle band. Let's every normal Australian who's going to earn anywhere up to $200,000, let them have that 30-cent band, because the economy is expanding. It is doing well financially. We are able to pay off our debt. We are moving back to surplus. Give them some of it back. And Labor is saying, no chance. We want that cash. We're going to do stuff with it. Good stuff, schools, hospitals. But again, the problem is if you don't encourage, the economy may not grow, the revenue may not be there, the expenditure can't happen. But in a utopic way, I'm pretty excited to see a 4-band from 2024, first 18,000 tax-free, 18 to 45, 19, 45 to 230%. Now that's a lot for the Singaporeans, but believe you me, for us Australians, we can't believe our luck. 30%? Goodness me, that's Christmas. But 45 if you earn over 200, and that's a lot, you know, but that's only 6%. But they're burdened with a large chunk of the whole thing. And this is, again, the key focus. Is this enough for people to believe and forgive the ills of the political quagmire that they've got themselves in and back them from a financial sense? They're also offering to do lots of stuff, and they're saying we can afford to do this stuff because the economy's growing. They're throwing an extra $25 billion in the tin to do all sorts of infrastructures all over Australia, including fast rail projects, congestion funding. There's billions going everywhere, $7 billion into New South Wales, you know, $4 billion into Queensland. Everywhere, every place, some sort of benefit to get you home to your little loved ones quicker, to get you racing on a train to wherever you have to live so far away because that's all you can afford, faster. That's what they're doing. Now this is on top of what was previously a $75 billion program. It's now a $100 billion program. So it's significant. It's real. And again, here to me is one of the differences between the two. To me, it's the difference between buying your kid a car and buying your kid a holiday. Infrastructure is the car. They may not use it properly. They might just drive around aimlessly. But they might start Uber driving. They might do deliveries, or they might actually drive to work. Heaven forbid they get a job. There will be jobs available. But if I buy them a holiday, i.e. welfare or anything that is intangible, then that's gone. That money will never be seen again. All we can do is have a conversation at dinner over it. There's no residual benefit. So to me, always buy your kid a car rather than a holiday. Infrastructure is the car. Physicality, at least if you got it wrong, there's something to show for it. There's lots going on. Now finally, they have recognized that Mother Nature needs some help. One of the reasons that they figured it out is this year there was over $1 billion in disaster relief funding in the budget. You know, Liberals have had to come out just in the last week and a bit and say, oh no, we believe in climate science. Finally, they've agreed to it. They've been denying it for ages. And now they want to lead the charge to fix it, apparently. But their logic is, Let's acknowledge that it's there, but let's find a financial path that is doable. Now that's a great ideal. I'm not sure if it's achievable. These things are pretty imminent, and it's unfortunate they didn't wake up 15, 20 years ago, but so be it, it's arrived. The problem with this is it has arrived with a 15-year delivery date. I hope they've got a really good freezer, because I don't know how long stuff lasts in the freezer, but if we don't fix some of these problems, it's going off. 15 years is a long time. They have promised now to comply with the Paris Treaty, that thing that Donald Trump didn't think was necessary. And how ironic that the US once more had record storms through winter, has had massive typhoons, cyclones, all pure coincidence if you ask Donald, nothing to do with any climate change issues whatsoever. But Australia has finally, present government acknowledged it. Now Labor's going even further to say they're going to drop the emissions targets below that. But this government has committed $2 billion to reach that 2030 target set by Paris. Will they do that? Not sure, but at least they've said they will. If you've been following the press over the last decade, it's, oh no, we don't need to, let's talk about it more, push it down, push it down. It's here, it's real, thank goodness they've got to it. And they've got announced last year $1.38 billion, they're doing Snowy 2, that's a big one. And then everything else is small, $100 million for Environmental Restoration Fund. I don't know what that's going to restore. They announced $500 million last year just for the Great Barrier Reef, so this isn't going to do much. Maybe some sandbanks somewhere, I don't know. $56 million to get the hydropower of Tasmania, which is massive, and only a hatful of people live down there, so they've got a little bit extra, to plug it into the mainland and bring that power up as well. But that's it. Nothing more for the environment. Sounds good, low in detail, long in delivery, but at least it's been acknowledged. I think for the last 5 budgets in a row I've been saying nothing for the environment, so it's something. Health, well that's not getting too much, but it's because they're doing stuff. They are proudly announcing that over the next few years, the current $81.8 billion spend will lift to $89.5. But there's no specifically massive announcements within that. There is $200 million and $150 million for MRI. Coincidentally, the Labor Party came out and announced free cancer treatment, MRI for everybody. That's their big push. It was already pretty much in the budget, so they didn't really announce too much that wasn't already there. But they've made it look so. You know, there's $1 billion for primary care to help doctors look after the elderly a bit more and tackle serious injury, a serious disease. There's $300 million for more and more drugs to go on to the pharmaceutical. And again, this government's been very strong in that. Over 2,000 drugs have been added to the pharmaceutical benefit system. That's a huge plus if you need them. There's $100 million for a Sydney Children's Cancer Care and $80 million for a cellular immunotherapy centre in Victoria and a brain and spiral ward in South Australia. But again, smaller pieces. It quickly goes from very large announcement to very small announcement in these sorts of areas. But that's because they feel that the underlying expenditure is significant enough that we don't need to crow about it too much. Rightly or wrongly, I'm not sure. $386 million is going to be spent to get people to participate in sport, so hopefully you get healthier before you get sick. Most of that is actually going for women's change rooms. So if you've been down to Australia lately, you'll notice that the latest craze is AFL Women's. I can't say I'm a convert, but I think it's fabulous. You know, everyone loves it, so I'm not going to say anything. But, you know, they are needing more help. And this, again, this is the government. Give it to them. That's the way we do it in Australia. Give, give, give. But, you know, it used to be in the old days when I was younger, you know, you used to get only a grant for half of whatever you needed. You had to raise the other half. Not in the modern world. You can get a grant for the whole amount. It's incredible. In terms of education and training, again, not much here to be announced, but a continuation of previous years where early education daycare is being extended, 15 hours a week for everybody. That's all great. They're spending $500 million on high school vocational activity to upgrade schools, provide enhanced training. They're providing 1,000 regional scholarships for both overseas and local students to study out of the city. They want to try and get people out of the city, relieve congestion, get those cities reinvigorated. So that's a fairly decent idea. And there's 80,000 new apprenticeship places because they're creating lots of jobs. You've got all this infrastructure, you've got all this expansion going on, they need trades, and they're giving employers an $8,000 incentive if they take on an apprentice, and they're giving the apprentice $2,000 as well. You know, he gets the first half after 3 months and the second half after 12 months. But that's a helping hand. That's his tools, that's his course, that's something. You know, so that's a fair contribution. Again, you'll see the Labor Party wants to give all expenses paid for this, twice as much. We'll see how that goes. But this, again, is not significant. It's individual element. The early education is a continuation of past policy. It's just every year renewed. But it's a step in the right direction. Other announcements that are noteworthy, 10,000 more at-home aged care packages. But again, there's such a waiting list for this, it's just not funny. But they keep announcing more and more places. At least they're there. There's 13,500 more residential care facilities for the aged. So if you can't stay in your home, they're going to have more, places you can go to. A massive $75 pensioner energy assistance package, because power's gone up apparently. So for each individual pensioner, they get $75. Hold back, people. But remember, if you're a couple, you get $150. So that's really going to town. Okay, we'll be straight down the casino for lunch, I'm sure. There's $300 million in a bond issue for affordable housing, which is great, apparently the largest in Australia's history. But this is the thing that does get me get my goat a bit. $300 million to build houses, do something really nice. $500 million to hold a royal commission into how badly disabled people have been treated. I think we need to have a royal commission into why do royal commissions cost so much. How can it be $500 million to investigate? Not to rectify, this is just to check it out. I can't understand that. I need to become a royal commissioner. If someone knows where there's a website on how to become a royal commissioner, please send it to me. And then when you consider we're only spending $328 million to combat domestic violence, and that is to set up helplines and everything and deliver counselling and a home that you can go to if you're a victim of domestic help. $300 million to do it in a serious way, $500 million to talk about something. There's something wrong with that. There's something very wrong with that. The cash card, which is a favourite of mine, that's being rolled out even further, was very successful. There's $300 million going to the police force to help with drug crackdowns, again, especially for bikies. There's something about them. And ASIO is getting a further $570 million for enhanced security protocols of everything. So there are some of the other things. There are obviously many other things in the budget, but let's see if they get in first, and I might report back later. I'd like to talk to you now about the Labor Party. Now, it just reminds me of one of my favourite songs, from when I was a child. I don't know if you ever heard it. The song that goes, was it, anything you can do, I can do better. Do you all remember that? It was from Pauline Hanson's favourite movie, Annie's Got a Gun. I don't know if it was a great, great show. And this is the Labor Party. It should be their slogan, it should be their theme song, because they're going to make Australia best in the world. I mean, it's not just that they're good, they're the best. And this is wonderful. I think this is something we can all look forward to if there is a change in government. We will be the best in the world. There is nothing that this guy can't do. He's incredible. There's $3.2 billion to give everybody free care in cancer. Wonderful. There's way more spending on universities, schools and everything. They keep saying the government is spending less than and took money away. It didn't. Labor had hoped to spend more and they stopped spending the extra, but they spent a fortune. But again, give more places, more quota, give more. There's 150,000 new apprenticeship positions, all fees paid. All fees paid. No cost. No cost. Just turn up, you'll be right. We're going to give everyone $2,000 to put a solar battery in their house. They didn't learn anything about the pink bats last time. They just want to do it. And bear in mind, this is a guy who basically is guaranteed to win the election because the Liberal Party's done so badly internally, and still he's going out and giving everybody free stuff when he's a shoo-in. God, He wants more electric vehicles, 50% target, and lower targets than Paris, everything, and that can be done. We don't know how, but it can. We're going to give more benefits to anyone earning under 45,000. No tax, lots more excesses. You can have it all. But we'll keep doing that and fully fund it by charging everybody else more. That seems fair. That's no problem. They won't mind because we're a generous society, apparently. Awesome. Generous with other people's money, apparently. He wants to remove franking credits because he sees that as some sort of rich gimmick where it's what people who don't receive the pension survive on. It's terrible. He doesn't even understand the economics. And one of the great things is if he does get in and you're worried about losing franking credits, we'll just do more syndication, because if you earn higher interest, you'll absorb your franking credits instead of losing them. So it's not sensible, the policy. It doesn't have any justification, and the market will adjust to accommodate. He just has no clue. And of course, he generously wants to give more and more and more by charging more and more and more. It's an ideological generosity, as I called it last year. It's fabulous. The big companies won't get tax cuts. I'm in favour of that. I have no issue. And they're going to remove negative gearing on established properties. Now, again, I'm in favour of this. I don't have a problem with this generally, because we do want to support the construction industry rather than this rotation of stock. So this one I don't have an issue, but the one I do have an issue, well, he's going to provide for 250,000 homes, but the one I do have an issue is with the capital gains tax. At the same time of removing the negative gearing deduction, they also want to reduce the current discount you get for having long-term assets that appreciate, i.e. hold it more than 12 months, from the current 50% tax-free component to only a 25% tax-free component. And again, what he doesn't recognise is that if you change that, the behaviour will change and people will sell less frequently. Because I don't want to sell if I'm going to incur tax, so I'll keep deferring the decision to sell, which also means that the tax collection is deferred and deferred and deferred. So it's not an automatic behavioural swap over and same, it's a behavioural change when you change the tax structure. And one of the things I'm seriously worried about, he wants to reinstate penalty rates on Sunday and public holidays. They finally got rid of those last year, ironically through a Labor Party glitch. Now, this was necessary because people couldn't afford to open their businesses on Sundays and public holidays because you were paying up to 3 times to your staff. Now, it's not that that's unfair. You should be paid a penalty or an excess for working on a day of inconvenience. But those penalty rates were negotiated when wages were $3 an hour. The basic minimum wage now is $20 an hour. So if you're getting triple on a Sunday, that's $60 an hour that employer has to pay, plus 10% superannuation, plus potentially payroll tax, plus everything else. It's just not affordable. So again, you lose the employment. A lot of Singaporeans always come to me and say, "Oh, Steve, I was in Australia, everything was closed." That's why. They can't afford to open. If you want full employment, you relax that and let it sort itself out. People aren't working any longer hours. They're on rosters and all sorts of things. But this to me is extremely dangerous. This could be a real handbrake on the economy if this comes back in, because it affects way of life more than anything. And amazingly, with all of these great things, with all of these free supplements, with everything that's going on, he can still generate bigger surpluses and pay the debt off faster. So lay down misère. PM Shorten, please come in. That's just the fact. But again, the issue that I have is that regardless of whether you should or shouldn't, do you have to go all the way and do it for free? And it inspired me to come up with a quote today that I'll share with you. You can take this home. This is an original. This is, you have to use my name if you ever want to use it. I was thinking back about behavioural issues, and it just dawned on me that our parents invested in none of our fun and all of our future. So by that I mean they didn't give us money to go have a good time. They said study, we'll put you through school, we'll do the right things, we'll put a roof over your head, we'll teach you manners. So no fun, but we're going to give you a better future. This generation, the parents, fund all of the fun, and the kids have put the future on pause. That's the problem. And we're thinking, oh, look, they'll be so happy we gave them free TAFE. They won't turn up. They don't want to work. The parents will be subsidising them. They'll be living at home. This is the problem. We've gone too far in giving too much, and we have no resilience, no strength, etc. I even was driving the other day through the countryside in Perth, and I was just looking out thinking, I don't think the youth of today would have come out here to virgin bush and forest with an axe and cut down all the trees, moved all the rocks, and built this road. I'm pretty sure that they wouldn't do that. They just expect to drive upon the road with no taxes for free in a car that you gave them. So when we keep giving more and more and more at parental level, at governmental level, we're not getting bang for our buck anymore. And that worries me. And the more we give, the less we're going to get back. And that concerns me. And that's what I think is fundamentally flawed in this ideological generosity generation that we live in. Toughen up for you guys as parents, please. I'll send you a copy of my quote to put on the fridge. It's important. To show you perspective, and this is why, again, where I get worried, because the numbers aren't always analysed properly. Here is this horrible negative gearing that they talk about. The average negative gearing claim in Australia for fact is $1,683 a year in 15-16. It dropped to $1,512 in 16-17, and it probably dropped again in 17-18. Why? Because interest rates were low and dropping, and rents go up a couple of bucks a year. And people can't afford to buy too many more properties. But you can see it's not property tycoons that are the mass owners, it's average people. There's 2 million people with 2 or less properties. There's only 20,000 with 6 or more. And for the sake of reference, I will confess that I am one of those. Just so I can dispel any bias and vested interest. But my properties aren't massively negative geared because interest rates are too cheap. It's just how it goes. Now, the fact of the matter, and this is why when they tried to take out negative gearing before, it got revoked very quickly, is that if you stop allowing landlords to claim that $1,500 as though that's massive, then what they will do is say, well, I need $30 a week more rent. Simple as that. So it won't be the landlord that you heard, it won't be the government that you heard, it'll be the tenant. And that was why it got tossed out last time. But to argue that there's these rich, horrible people just stopping children from buying properties, that's what they're calling it. They're saying it's an intergenerational theft, that you owning a property as an investment are stopping a first home buyer from buying it. That's absolute baloney. What you hope is that one of these property owners is your parents and he gives it to you. These people didn't buy these properties just to collect them. They bought them for that intergenerational protection. They bought them to pass something to their families. And he's trying to argue that by doing that, you're in the way of it. He's just out of touch. But that's just an issue. But it's not going to save any tax. Even $1,500 at an average rate of 30% tax is $500 per taxpayer. Okay, it's $1 billion of tax. But what's that going to achieve in the scheme of it? He's paying $3 billion just for cancer care. $1 billion, that's nothing these days to these guys. Here's the other thing. This is the biggest problem I see with Australia. Here's where our money goes. We're spending $180 billion on social security and welfare, and yet just $120 on education and health. That's not right. but it's always been the way. Now again, this is the Liberal philosophy, is to say, let's make the economy stronger, let's create more jobs so there's less people on welfare. They'll be contributors rather than withdrawers. That's the logic. Or you say, no, let's just give people stuff. Now, if you look at it, in fact, in the last Labor budget in 2013, the spending on Social Security was $138 billion. It was 34.7% of the budget. This government, it's $180 billion, 36. It's increased 30% over that 6 years. Health was 64.6, 16%. It's still 16%. 81.8 billion though, 26.6, increase, the same percentage, but significantly more amount in just 6 years. And education, 30 billion up to 36, 7.5 to 7.3, but 22% increase. Now, I would love to say to you, if I was a Liberal person, which I'm not, I would say to you, that's what the Liberals do. We love to spend that money. But that wasn't Liberal policy. What a lot of people forget is that when the Liberal Party got back into office, all these spending programs had been pre-legislated by Labor. So Labor can take all the credit for the additional spending on health and schools. All the credit, because they had legislated it 5 years in advance when Tony Abbott arrived. And if you recall back to their first budget, I actually gave them a bit of a rocket saying I would have reversed some of that, but they made the conscious decision to say, look, we will live with these commitments, we will honour these commitments, and we will deal with them as best we can. So it's Labor that can take the credit, and you should take credit for additional spending. It's a good thing. But it's Liberal that made it affordable. That's the difference. The Liberals went out and said, let's expand the economy so the percentage line stays, and we can afford these things. And again, they've done it by lowering income taxes, lowering corporate taxes, and expanding the base. And that's the important thing here. We don't want to be paying everybody welfare forever. That's why with retirees, we want them to have imputation credits and tax-free superannuation, because then they're not getting social security or welfare. You go from a 30,000, 40,000 cost or more to a 10,000, 20,000 contribution. It's as simple as that. And if we look at credibility, I think this is a very important slide. You can see here, this is all the budgets since 2002, and believe you me, I've been there for all of them. So I know them all pretty well. And you can see there's a few Liberals at the start, a few Labor in the middle, and a few Liberals at the end. But if we look at who came in on or better than their forecast, Liberals, 9 out of 11 budgets, they've been on or better than their forecast. Labor, 1 out of 6. Now, I don't know about you, but if I got a 17% pass or mark in my school, that wasn't good. I would dare not go home that day. I certainly would not tell my parents that I got an exam result. I'd wait for them to ask me a week or two later saying, Steve, weren't you doing your exams? No, I don't think so. No. But if 17% is not scary enough, it's the measure of miss that worries me. 6 budgets, 1 on target, missed by a total of $123 billion, or an average of $20 billion wrong. Libs, 9 out of 11 achieved, an average of $6 billion better off. Now that's indisputable. It's not luck, it's good management, it's good practice, it's improving the economy. And Labor always said, and I gave them a hard time throughout, always said, oh, there's a revenue crisis. We thought we'd get more revenue. It's not our fault for having bad budgets. But if you look, they had pretty much more revenue year on year every year. They just never had enough to fulfill their appetite to spend. And this, again, is why I'm a bit concerned at this election, is because the same traits exist today. Let's get into power, let's get hold of the checkbook, and let's go crazy handing it out. And that does worry me. Now, the good news is Australia can afford it. The bad news is, when do we fix it up? Someday, sometime, you have to fix it up, or you end up like a country like America, so far in debt that you're beholden to everybody. And that's the issue. As soon as you are financially behind the eight ball at a governmental level, the market dictates terms. We want this. We need deregulation. We want these assets. You can't do this. If you want money, you have to do that. That is not a good position to be in. Go ask Greece how that went. Not too good. Took them ages to fix it up. But that's what happens. Now, Australia's a long way from that point, but when you're 20 billion out on significant deficits as it is, it doesn't take that long to get there. And that's what worries me. And this is, again, the choice of in the electorate is, do you take financial sensibility or do ideologically generosity? And I can't tell you who's going to win, because there's too many of those new generation kids, X, Y, Zs, A, B, Cs, I don't know what they are these days. There's a new one for everything. And let me tell you, if you gave me a choice 20 years ago and said, Steve, stay at home and I'll pay you as much money as you want, I'll give you a car, you don't have to do any chores, just enjoy yourself and you can go on holiday with your friends at my cost, or go slave like I did, go sacrifice, go cop it, fails, succeed, work, misery. I'm not sure I would have taken the path that I did. I don't know about you. I think I would have gone, give me the remote control. I'm sitting down. I can't blame them for that. I blame us. We're giving them the remote control. I didn't get that choice. But I don't know. But you can see it's neck and neck. They did have a budget bounce, as they call it. But this is on single party preferred. On the way Australian system, whoever comes third basically decides who wins the election. Because if you come third, you give the votes to the person you want. So even if they're second, if they get your votes, they go first. You understand that? Because I've never understood that. Hence why someone like One Nation could win this election. Not by winning the election, but by deciding who does. And again, if you've been following the politics there, that's a little bit of a hot potato right now. So no one knows what to do with that. So it is way too close to call, and I'm not sure the sensibility will win over personal greed. That's the big mystery thing. Let's get on to some good news. Victory. You might recall in the 17 budget, the government tried to say that if you were an Australian expat living abroad and you sold your house while you're living abroad, that you would pay full capital gains tax on that property no matter how long you'd been overseas, whether it was a week or a month or whatever. In 18, the legislation passed the lower house. In March 18, it went through the Senate. SMATS was there, nagging, harassing, hounding, all to no avail, because every time something happened, the ministers changed hands. You know, we soon got in touch with Australian Hong Kong, and they were superstars. SMATS funded them to go down and get face-to-face time with the ministers. We're very proud to do that. We felt it very important for our clients, and I think we were the only ones that dipped our hand in the pocket. I wish I'd gone with them, but I was on tour doing the budget seminar of all things, would you believe? And they did a great job. We've supported them ever through, and that got us to win a reprieve where in October 18 the legislation came off the floor. In December 18, finally, after chipping away, the Labor Party conceded that expats shouldn't have been included and said that the government shouldn't do it. And finally, in March 19, the Liberal Party said, oh, look, we're probably not going to proceed this. You know, it's getting too long in the tooth. It's been sitting on the sidelines for so long, and we're not sure that we want to do this. And we got that by saying it was unfair and unreasonable. And that legislation, I'm proud to say, has now lapsed. It's gone. So we've won that crusade. The first time we've ever won the crusade. Yes, you can applaud me. I will take it. It was a pain in the neck. We were hoping that in this budget that they would claw back the $500 million that they think it was going to make over the forward estimates of 4 or 5 years. That did not happen. You know, so it's not dead yet, but it won't go through in this term. And, you know, we just remind people, don't panic, don't sell. There's a lot of people that were worried as expats that have to sell because there was a June 19 reprieve that if you sold prior to June 19 it wouldn't help. Don't sell. I don't think this is coming back, but we should get a formal announcement sometime soon, maybe as an election sweetener. That might be the thing they throw out to all expatriates. But this is a huge win, huge win. Our next crusade, land tax. Land tax at the state level. It's absolutely outrageous. So get ready for that. You need to join me on that crusade. I like crusades now. Let's have a look at the currency. Did it get any movement from the budget? No, not really. The currency has been extremely soft in Australia for no real reason. The US is in a mess. You know, Donald thinks he's doing pretty well, but China hasn't quite agreed with that. But, you know, the thing that I don't understand why the currency in Australia is so weak is that our trade balance has never been better. Again, looking back to my childhood as I was reminiscing about being not a sport little brat, all I remember was trade deficits. Every quarter, the trade deficit. Now we're getting trade surpluses. So our dollar should be strengthening, not weakening. And we've now just had a continuation of our world record of 28 consecutive years without a recession. So the last one way back in 1991, I think that was the recession we had to have, if I recall. We haven't had one since. That's a pretty good effort. No one else has done that. Australia has. Why? Because we're expanding population. We've got all the resources. We've got farming. We've got school. We've got great people. We work reasonably hard and we pay truckloads of taxes. Hence why we deserve a break with a little bit of tax every now and again. But that economy will continue to expand because our population will continue to expand and it's all fine. But I'm on record at saying the dollar should be in that 75 to 80 cent bracket. I hold my line on that even though it's not. I still think that's about a natural mark. We'll see what happens. And for the Sing, what's going on with that? How happy must you all be that the Sing dollar is subpar? What a great time to send money down and invest in our syndicates or buy a property or do something. Unbelievable. Why is it there? I don't know. What is the Singapore government wanting to buy in Australia at the moment? I'm not sure. Because I know they can do that. They can move it wherever they want. That's pretty attractive. It's killing me with my expenses, but, you know, it's good. I don't think the Singapore dollar should be sub $1. I don't know about you, but if I had extra Singapore dollars, which I don't because I'm a poor Australian, I'd probably be sending it down to Australia. So if you think of sending some, it's not a bad time to go. If we look at why Australia's economy stays so strong for 28 years, this is the key. It always has been. It's the key to our housing market. It's the key to our economy. It's population growth. 1.6% a year, one of the highest in the Western world, and continues to do so. New South Wales and Victoria have been leading the way, but for the first time in the last year and a half, 2 years, their population growth has actually slowed a little bit. You know, New South Wales was above 120-odd thousand, now at 119,500. Victoria was above 140-odd thousand, now dropped below 139. And you're seeing that the impact of that is a scare in the property market. Because 4,000 or 5,000 high net worth individuals with large checkbooks not coming to a market can impact the market that way. Just like 4,000 or 5,000 people arriving can change the market. They can overstimulate. But it's still super strong, super strong. So there is no risk in those markets. Queensland's starting to get some real traction, so that's looking pretty good. Yeah, West Australia is still on the soft side, but that's starting to change and we'll see the reasons why. It's just taking a long time to manifest. But 400,000 new Australians. Now what they have done is in this budget they have announced, as they did previously, they're dropping the quota for migration from 190,000 to 160 in the aim of taking pressure off infrastructure. Why? Because everybody's going to Sydney and Melbourne. Not sure why, because Perth's way better. But they're going there and it is under pressure and it is congested and the government's trying to catch up. They should have seen this 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years ago. Oh, they did, but they underestimated it. So they're trying to slow it down to catch up. That's all they're doing, but it's not going to have material influence for a while because These are 5-year visa. When you get your PR, you got 5 years to arrive. So there is already a 5-year tunnel coming up. So announcing a quota cut now will probably not have any influence for 3 years. That's just the way it is. But it's a good thing for the economy. What it has done for the property market is we've seen Sydney, as predicted, move into that slow phase. Not slow, apparently doom, atrocious, end of world. I love it. Perth, Brisbane still kicking off opportunity, and Melbourne I still think is a good market, but it's divided now. It's confused because of a couple of reasons which I'll show in a minute. But everything is going pretty well according to plan. So Sydney's getting opportunistic if you're brave enough to spend the money it costs to enter that market. Melbourne still has value if you buy the right property. And Brisbane and Perth are very opportunistic still. To show you, what it's like when the cycle ends. And everyone forgets, these cycles are natural. They spin around constantly. Australia's cycle is the smoothest because of that population growth. Because every time you build something, someone has to arrive to live in it. If they don't arrive, you've got oversupply. But we keep having people arrive. But there's Sydney. Now had 6 consecutive quarters of negative growth. Who would have thought that could happen? It was pretty obvious. I've been telling you that for over 2 years. But 7.8% decline for the year, and everybody wants to jump off a building. But when you have had 13.8, 12.2, 13.9, 10.3 growth, you should be celebrating. Your properties have doubled or more, yet they're all miserable about the few bob that they've lost recently. As I remind everybody, this is the first time in the history of Australia that a single cycle has generated $1 million plus profits in a market. Never, ever, ever has that been done. 50 grand before, 100 grand, 200,000, 300,000, but never $1 million. That's happened this time. But instead of going, wow, I made $1 million, they're going, I've lost 50. I've lost 100. Are you kidding me? It's good days still, but it's still strong. Now, Melbourne's ironic. Melbourne shouldn't be going in decline. It's going in decline for 2 things. One, the false disease. Sydney has pneumonia. The guy in Melbourne has a runny nose. He thinks he has pneumonia, so he's worried. And 2, because we've got a distorted market. What's happening in Melbourne is there was a mass construction boom, particularly for foreign investors, of really bad property that is now finished and coming back on the resale market and being sold at lower prices than they bought it. Hence, negative growth. The normal market of genuine household and genuine living is holding and actually still improving. But on the figures, the averages look bad. But people react to figures. They react to proof. That's why they feel bad. But the dominant force in the market is still upwards. Brisbane, looking good there. Little blip this time. But that's where most of those people from Sydney and Melbourne will sell and go. Perth, well and truly overdue for growth. I've been saying it for a while. If I keep saying it, it will eventually happen, I promise. And Hobart, still the star of Australia. 9.6% growth in Hobart. Amazing, amazing. I've got to go there. Funny enough, that's where the magazine is based, so I will get to go there in the very near future. But here's why we've got issues. Foreign investors have dropped from 70 billion down to $12 billion. And again, we've been predicting this. We warned about it. Why? Because the state government's introduced foreign buyers levies, 7% and 8% across Australia. And they wonder why they stop buying. Investors invest for the expectation of profit. If you make the cost of entry too high or the opportunity too low, they will not invest. But, as I keep reminding, 12 million is still twice as high as our previous historic average. So it's fantastic. But it's glass half full, glass half empty, isn't it? Are we happy that it's twice as much as it used to be? Or are we sad that it's, a fifth of what it used to be. Depends which way you look at it, I suppose. But the big issue here is this was not good property. This was bad property, and that's why you're seeing it resold, not settled, and not wanting to be bought at a reasonable price by the next person, because they see what it is. And that's why you're seeing distortion in the numbers, because this stuff is losing money, good stuff is not losing so much. Sensibly, and this again, you've got to give credit where credit's due, in this budget, the government has forecast that housing construction will fall by 7% in terms of economic value. You think? That's why. But again, you can see this is where the sensibility of their forecasting is. They are recognising that there are issues and they factor for those issues, and therefore their figures remain credible. But this is just normal. In terms of the overall rolling averages, you can see Australia did minus 2.3 on average for the quarter, minus 4.6 for the year. Sydney did minus 10. But again, it's off the top. It's off a lot bigger number than before. But if you had bought early enough, you can see the 10-year average is 7.2 and the 5-year average is 6.8, even after the fall. 6.8 is pretty good. That's the normal return you would expect, and hence why averages always work out. But again, if you look at the number that I've been warning people about of recent time and how it was easy to predict, Sydney in December 17 was 54% above the national average. And I said it was not sustainable. It had to come back, and it has. It went from 54 to 49 to 38. That's getting into the range that it should be. We're not overpricing Sydney. We're not over-collapsing it. We're getting it back into normal calibration. But in all truth, look at the average, 1,062,000. If you've ever looked for a property in Sydney to live in, it isn't $1,062. Alan, you're the local expert. Has your property about that? Not much luck finding that. 2-bedroom apartment in most areas. Not a house. But it's naturally balancing itself out. And the other markets that are under are too far under, so expect them to keep coming up. So again, long-term, still sensible. You know, the market in Sydney is cooling off because it's end of cycle, but let me show you why it's not risky. It's still only got a 3% vacancy, and that's after it coming up from 2.1 last year. 3% is a safe, balanced rental market. But there was a lot of supply came in, but if you remember back to the population growth, it's still extremely strong at 120-odd thousand. So it can support the construction that is in play and finishing, and the market won't get massively distorted. But end of cycle causes a bit of panic. That panic will last until people see that it bottoms out. It won't bottom out whilst people try to exploit it, and people will exploit it for as long as they can. It's as simple as that. Melbourne, even with the large supply coming in the market, it's still dropping its vacancy factor. The problem there is it's not nice stock. It's livable in the short term, it's not livable in the long, but there's so many people turning up, 140,000, they have to live somewhere. So it's okay. And there's Perth. This is why I'm so bullish on Perth. Its vacancy factor has fallen from 5.5 to 2.8 in a single year. That's showing you that population is coming back, that the vacancy is being absorbed, that the market is moving towards growth. And for the first time in four years, it's got positive rental growth. It's been dropping its rental values for 4 years, and now you're seeing a tightening. So all markets in Australia are stable and safe because of the population growth, because of a stable economy, and because Australians earn a lot of money even though they pay a lot of tax. Finishing off, I'm not sure if any of these things will come into play. I hope they do. I hope they don't. I don't know. I'm so confused. But what are the highlights and lowlights? I think you have to really give this government, through high rotation of personnel, incredible credit for being able to achieve its forecasts and being reliable throughout, despite all of its chaos internally. Imagine if they didn't do that. What could they have achieved? I'm so rapt that the infrastructure is working well, that we are buying cars instead of holidays. That's what we need to do. Something with residual value that we can measure. And at long last, we've seen the environment mentioned, albeit with a 15-year delivery time. That's a bit sad to me. We need it a little bit more urgent, but at least it's there. I think you can see they are being generally fair. Expenditure is going up in health. It's going up in schools. It's going up in welfare. Everyone's getting tax cuts across the board. They can't be any fairer than they are. And they are not bringing in new taxes. They are slashing taxes and still achieving good financial outcomes, which is very, very important. And jobs. And if you remember back to the last few budgets, the key that they pushed was their policy was all about jobs and growth. Growth gives jobs, jobs gives growth. It's a self-fulfilling circle, and that's why they invested so heavily in committing to things. And it's working. It's paying off, and it's paying off substantial financial and social dividends, and people got to see it. And I'm over the moon that we've got the CGT lapsed in Parliament. That's a massive thing. I'm really happy about that. The low lights, well, if you came last year, you might have a tinge of deja vu, because in terms of structure of the budget, there's not a great deal of difference. Last year, what did they do? More infrastructure spend and personal tax cuts. What's the highlight of this budget? Infrastructure spend and tax cuts. The one before that, infrastructure spend and tax cuts. There is a consistent theme. It's Rambo 1, Rambo 2, Rambo 3. It's just a rerun. I'm not sure how many Rambo movies they could have made, but I don't know where we're going with this one, but at least it's working, so people seem to attend. I don't know whether the financial success, as you may call it, is enough to cover all the cracks of InDivision, and I'm not sure who's going to sell this very well. You know, like I say, they should be boasting about the fact that their financial history is so strong, but they're very timid in saying it too loudly in Australia, because people say, well, you're not spending enough. People say that you should have done more. People say, why didn't you give it to me? So it's hard to sell. It's hard to sell if you're doing the right thing financially. And the electorate, I don't think they get it. It's pretty hard to compete with sensible versus generous. It's a really tough call. Come to my place. I'll give you as much food as you need, or come to his place and he'll give you more than you can eat. I don't know. Which place do you want to go? I'm a better chef. I don't know. See how it goes. And I'm absolutely disgusted that in Australia they're calling a new phrase of generational theft. I've never even heard of it before. But like I say, when these people aren't contributing, aren't proactive, and aren't showing gumption because we have bred it out of them through generosity, how much are we obliged to provide? How much? Someone has to answer that at some stage. And I think the other thing that I would still have liked to have seen is more state interaction. Things like the land taxes, etc., need to be addressed, and there's not enough communication. Although I will say, as a proud West Australian, it's fabulous to see the GST fixed in WA, which will be the single biggest driver of the WA economy in the history of the world. We're finally getting a fair share of GST, so expect that. And I suppose the billion dollar question is this budget enough to win? I don't know if I can answer that, but you know, normally I rank the budget, as you would know if you'd been before, and I give it a mark out of 10. This time I'm giving it a probability of election success. I think there's a 40% likelihood they will win and a 60% they won't. Hence why for the first time ever we covered both sides. I hope I've given you an impartial view, maybe a little bit biased, because I do think people are too lazy these days. You know, and that's where my bias sits, not politically. I think we need to stand up as parents and individuals and say, do your share. Learn some manners and appreciate what you get. If we could do that on a societal level, at a fiscal level, and at your house and mine, by golly, we'd have a better place all around. And on that note, I thank you very much for your attendance. Good luck to both sides in the election. And may the biggest checkbook win. Good night.